college football season brings a level of chaos that is unmatched by other sports. And in the early going, there can be things that just completely surprise you. Things you didn't see coming, teams that were completely flying under the radar. And in the old ways of college football, this would have meant you had a chance at competing for a quality bowl game. But in the 12-team playoff era, this means these teams might have an actual chance to make it into the college football playoff. So in today's video, we're going to look at some of those teams that are off to a surprising 2-0 start and buy or sell them as college football playoff contenders. So before we can do any rating of buying or selling these teams, we need to categorize each team that's off to a 2-0 start this season by as expected, unsurprising, or surprising, which is the tier we worry about, the surprising 2-0 teams that we're going to actually buy or sell to. So in the expected tier is going to be anyone that was favored heavily or just favored straight up in their first couple of games, expected generally speaking to have a good season and start off 2-0. So there's no surprises here, right? Teams like Georgia and Miami, Alabama, Ohio State, all in here, or teams that just lined up on some cupcakes early but might not necessarily be the best this year or great, like Wisconsin or a team like Washington. And so those are the teams that we're not going to be taking a look at because I don't think there's too much to take away from what they've done so far. So in the next tier of 2-0 teams, it's going to be the unsurprising tier. It's nothing that is like too surprising or pops off the paper, but maybe a case where a team wasn't necessarily expected to go 2-0, like North Carolina. They played Minnesota early in the season. Not many people might have expected them to come out on top there. A team like Pitt getting a win against Cincinnati. Yeah, that's different than what some people would have thought. Nebraska over Colorado is another example. So most of the teams in this tier have won a game that was pretty close, and maybe not everybody expected them to go 2-0, but the fact that they are 2-0 isn't the most surprising thing in the world. And that leaves us with a group of 14 teams that are going to be the subject of this video. And those are the surprising 2-0 teams. Teams that have gone out on a limb and won a game, at least one, maybe two in some cases, that people really didn't expect them to win this season. You look at a team like San Jose State beating Air Force, that puts them in here. NIU, obviously, the massive upset over Notre Dame. South Carolina, the dominant win at Kentucky as a 10-point underdog. Teams that in the preseason, when people looked at this, they said, yeah, no, there is no way these guys start 2-0, or it's very unlikely that they start 2-0. And if you told anybody that these teams would start 2-0, they probably wouldn't believe you. So the question remains with this group of teams, are they contenders? Are we buying or selling? And so let's break them up into categories, starting with the hard sell. Hard sell means no chance. It's not going to happen. It's a fun start. This team can maybe push for a bowl game, but it's not going to happen. And there's 4 teams that fall into that category. We've got ULM, San Jose State, Illinois, and Vanderbilt. Now, these 4 teams are in the hard sell tier for the following reasons, and we've got them listed out right here. For ULM, they had a signature win over UAB and an impressive win over Jackson State. They've got General Booty at quarterback, which is just one of the greatest names in the sport. And the explanation for why I'm hard selling, UAB could just be straight up bad this year, and ULM gets the win because they're the home team in the non-conference, and Trent Dilfer has been struggling to get his feet under him at UAB, so that could be a solid explanation there. The Sun Belt is really deep, so in order for ULM to come out on top and get the auto bid, because an at-large is not happening for a team like ULM, they would have to get past some really difficult teams in the Sun Belt, and that's probably not going to happen. There's so many other teams like App State and Texas State and even Louisiana and Coastal Carolina that are looking really strong this year that they're probably not going to be able to get past. And the team is really young. They brought in 35 recruits from last year's cycle and overall have very low returning production. So Brian Vincent really promising in the early going at ULM. I think long term that is a great feel, and maybe they could push for a bowl game this season. But if I was ULM, that's what I would be concerned about, not making a playoff push. But I doubt any ULM fans are actually thinking playoffs right now. Next up, we have Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a team that is also off to a 2-0 start. Their surprising victory was the one against Virginia Tech, where they shocked them in overtime. That game could be chalked up to somewhat of a more flukier, closer game. Maybe Virginia Tech isn't as good as some people thought they would be this season, which was an actual ACC contender. And then also the SEC. Vanderbilt has to play in the SEC. They have games against Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, and Texas. So it's not really a great sign when you have to play those teams, and I just don't think Vanderbilt has a realistic path as an at-large or as an automatic bid, especially in a world with no divisions. There's no way for them to really fluke their way through, and it's the same deal with Illinois. No divisions in the Big Ten. If the Big Ten West was still a thing, maybe I'd feel differently, but they have games upcoming against Nebraska, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan. Illinois' big win was obviously against Kansas, and I think that's just a case where Kansas got caught kind of sleeping, and maybe their offense isn't explosive because they don't have Andy Kotelnicki as an offensive coordinator. I didn't think Illinois dominated that game as much as Kansas sort of lost that game, and I know that's kind of a cliche to say sometimes, but this Illinois team isn't one that jumps off the page in any one way to me. I don't even think this is as good as that 2022 Illinois team that had a really good defense and won 8 games with Brett Bielema. And then last but not least in this tier, we have San Jose State, who their signature win was over Air Force, the one that was really surprising. But I just think Air Force is not that good this season. They had really low returning production numbers. Yes, Troy Calhoun is very consistent, but this is probably going to be a down year for Air Force. They'll be a fringe bowl team. And I don't really think there's an at-large shot for San Jose State at all as a group of 5 team. And their automatic bid path has to go through one of UNLV or Boise State pretty much. And those teams are just such next level. I don't think Ken Niumatalolo's squad is going to be up to that standard that quickly. But I do think Niumatalolo is a great coach. And the fact that they're off to a 2-0 start, great testament to him as a coach. So those are the teams I am hard selling on. From hard sell, we go to the soft sell. Teams where I think a playoff path is not likely, but maybe there is something. It's something that I'm not willing to just say, no, impossible, never going to happen. We've got 5 teams in this tier, which is Boston College, East Carolina, Michigan State, South Carolina, and Cal. For Boston College, their current resume is super paper thin. Their signature win is over Florida State, but that's a Florida State team that has looked awful. They just look horrible. And the fact that there was a ranking next to their name when Boston College beat them, I think is one of the reasons people are high on Boston College. It's one of the reasons they have a ranking right now. Just feels like it's definitely a knee-jerk reaction. Missouri and Michigan State are both very losable non-conference games that Boston College has to get through. If they win both of those, we're having a different conversation, especially if they somehow find a way to beat a Missouri team that is a top 10 team in the country. But they also have kind of a tough, sneaky tough ACC schedule. They got Louisville on there. They've got Syracuse. They got to go at both Virginia schools. And I'm not buying this quick of a rebuild under Bill O'Brien. I'm buying that maybe this team could be a little better than the Hafley team last season, but I'm not buying that they're just going to instantly, it's just a plug-and-play, turnkey roster at Boston College, because it really isn't. There's some serious flaws with that team. At East Carolina, they play App State and Liberty on the horizon. They're 2-0. They just got an impressive win last week, but I think there's still plenty of holes from a team that went 2-10 last season. And in the American, they must get past Tulane and Memphis still. Those App State Liberty games are both in the non-conference. So just a really brutal schedule for East Carolina, and still the remnants of last season cause me to believe it's going to be really tough for them to find a way. But Mike Houston appears to be turning things back around after that one glaring bad year. At Michigan State, their defensive line is too depleted, I think, to actually consistently win in Big Ten play. They got a really impressive win over Maryland, which is the reason that they are on the surprising 2-0 list, but also inconsistency with Aiden Childs. He's really young. You've heard people talk about it pretty much every time there's a broadcast, and they still have to play Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan. Just a really tough schedule in the Big Ten. Don't think Jonathan Smith can take this team to the playoff in year one, but I think he can make a bowl game, and they can definitely hit a ton of their goals this season, which takes us to Cal, who had one of their big wins and their big win last week over Auburn on the road. Auburn is an extremely volatile team, so as far as a signature win, I think that's a tough one to hang your hat on and a tough one to measure against, because it just is an Auburn team that lost to New Mexico State last year. They're really young. They don't have the players. They didn't go in the portal for a quarterback this offseason because they didn't think they were ready to compete. And Cal also has the Miami roadblock in the ACC. Is the ACC going to be a multi-bid conference this year? I don't know. And I don't know if Cal's defense can bail out their offense consistently. If you watch that game versus Auburn, their offense really struggled. Cal's did down the stretch. And I don't know if their defense can consistently throughout the season bail them out. And then obviously you have the Jaden Ott health things that have been going on. You hope he stays healthy and can help them in the ACC. There's certainly a way Cal could win a lot of games and be really successful this season. But as far as a playoff chance, I'm doing the soft sell. And then last in this tier, we have South Carolina. They get the impressive win over Kentucky. It's scheduled. They have to play Ole Miss, Bama, Oklahoma, Clemson, Missouri. I don't think their pass rush that's been blowing up opponents will be able to blow up every opponent, especially with what you see on their schedule. The one thing I put here, Beamer Ball, question mark, maybe Beamer Ball can just do the unthinkable and be consistent this year and allow them to, which is why this is upgraded from a hard sell to a soft sell. But outside of that, I don't really think there's a true path for South Carolina. But enough of this pessimism. Let's get to the optimistic part where I'm buying teams as legit teams that could make the college football playoff this year. And we're going to soft buy on Arizona State and NIU, which sounds completely crazy on the surface. And if you said that in the preseason, you would have been made fun of. I probably would have been one of the people making fun of you. But you look at Arizona State. First off, the Big 12 is absolutely chaotic this season. The one team I thought was going to be head and shoulders above everyone else was Utah. And with Cam Rising's injury concern, Isaac Wilson looks shaky. I don't know if Utah's much better of a team than they were last year without Cam Rising. And Sam Leavitt for Arizona State is absolutely cooking. The defense has played really well. I think they have one of the most underrated coaching staffs in the country with Kenny Dillingham, and they got Ward coaching that defense. I really just think that they got an actual path to make something happen in the Big 12 because of how chaotic that conference is. And then over to NIU, the MAC is very winnable this season. Miami of Ohio is a good squad. Toledo's a good squad, but there's no reason to think NIU cannot run through there with their clear identity. And we just watched them beat Notre Dame. The win over Notre Dame gives them a huge resume boost that can give them a leg up over other power conference competition. They've got another opportunity against NC State looming. Their defense can play, and I think Ethan Hampton is a steady presence for this offense. So for NIU, I actually do legitimately buy. The reason both of these teams would be a soft buy is for Arizona State, maybe we haven't seen enough. Maybe Mississippi State and Wyoming are just that bad. And then for NIU, it's a case of their inconsistency. Last season, we watched them beat Boston College and then lose to an FCS school in Southern Illinois. So we need to see some consistency week to week from NIU before I'm a hard sell on them. Or hard buy on them, I should say. Which takes us to the hard buy, which is the three remaining teams, Washington State, Coastal Carolina, and Iowa State. I'm hard buying these teams as legitimate college football playoff contenders. We start with Washington State. It all starts with the schedule. It is a very manageable schedule, and they won one of their biggest games. One of their critical wins is already behind them. They defeated Texas Tech. If you look at the rest of their schedule, they play Washington this next week in the Apple Cup, a really tight spread in that game, by the way, and then they've got games against Oregon State, Boise State, and Fresno State late in the season, but they totally can win all those games. And if they beat Washington, they are actually in a prime position to make things happen. John Mateer is absolutely electric, not just passing the ball, but running the football as well. And Washington State can still hang their hat on defense. We saw that against Texas Tech. And there's just weird things that happen in Pullman, so they can lure teams into their own stadium and get weird wins. Washington State, I think, has a lot working for them. The at-large bid is right there. They can't get an auto bid just like Oregon State. Hard buy, Iowa State is also in this tier because the Big 12 is chaos, and the offense this year for Iowa State is actually explosive. That is not something you've really been able to say, and that's been one of the things holding Iowa State back from being a legit contender. Their offense is explosive this year. Rocco Becht, he's got two receivers in Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins that are absolutely beasts. And then you got Abu Sama. You saw that late in the Iowa game. Iowa had shut them down, but then all of a sudden a few explosive plays, and that game was ripped wide open. Iowa State finds a way to win. The defense is among the best in the country. They've got a super underrated secondary. Their linebacking core is really legit, and their defensive line is awesome. And you saw them go toe-to-toe with Iowa, defensively speaking, but Iowa's offense is obviously tragically bad. And outside of that, they've got really good coaching, and they finally figured out some of that weird special team stuff. They didn't have a special teams coordinator for a while. I think they've overcome a lot of the drama surrounding this program last season, like the betting scandal and stuff. And after a strong finish to last year, I'm really buying them. I am hard buying them as a legit playoff contender, which takes us to Coastal Carolina. Tim Beck's team just absolutely crushed an early test at Jacksonville State, a team that was nearly in the CUSA title game last year. I really thought Jacksonville State was going to be something to be messed with, but Coastal Carolina torched them, and they're a team that just looks really excellent in the early going. App State and James Madison also look a little shaky, and they're still in Coastal Carolina's division. As you can remember, there's divisions in the Sun Belt still, so that gives them a slightly more feasible path in terms of what they have to do, and the Sun Belt has some national respect. I think people have been recognizing the work that those Sun Belt teams have been doing and the talent and the players that are there. And so if you're in a position where Coastal Carolina has wins over App State and Texas State and wins the Sun Belt, they're going to have those wins be respected because people recognize the level of football that is being played there. I am hard buying Coastal Carolina as a legit team that can make the college football playoff. So to recap, we are buying on 5 of these teams as legit college football playoff contenders, teams that have a chance and a path, and we're selling on 9 of them as teams that really don't necessarily have a path. There's obviously layers to that I just went over, but that's where I feel I am on all of those teams. This could age really well, really poorly, but we'll definitely learn more as the season goes on, and that's what just makes being in the thick of the season so fun, trying to draw conclusions, trying to figure out where the pieces are going to fall, and then actually learning each Saturday and getting one step closer to completing that puzzle. So go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff if you enjoyed the video. If you like this kind of format, we're going to continue to splice more long form videos throughout the week as the season starts to get in rhythm. This is one I thought I'd do. Thought it'd be pretty fun to be talking playoff. I know people respond well to that usually, so just let me know what you thought of the video, and if you have any other video ideas, we're probably going to be making a Heisman one, another tier list video for the middle of the season in the coming weeks, and of course we'll have our weekly mega predictor for week 3 out very shortly. But that's all I got for you guys, and I will see you guys later this week.